What's up, you guys? It's Jason from RPM, and today this video is just going to be a rundown for the Maverick R Max rear tanks. If you're just watching this video before you buy them, these are 6-gallon roto molded fuel tanks, probably the largest capacity, most engineered tanks that we've done to date. But we're constantly developing, and we came out with these ones and we're super excited for them, and they're the best addition you can do to your Maverick R. They drink fuel, and these kind of fix that. But we're going to do a rundown of how they're installed, kind of the steps, and maybe some of the details you may miss in the PDF instructions. The first thing is that we highly recommend that you read the instructions before you install these gas tanks, because there's a risk that goes on with this, and if you're not comfortable with doing it, take it to your local performance shop. They'll be able to do it. The last thing you need is a fuel leak in your car, and we try to prevent that with super clear, detailed instructions. So jumping to it, we have a lot of proprietary fittings on our gas tanks, and starting with that is this lower stainless one. This is the fitting that picks up fuel, and it's probably the most commonly over-tightened fitting on all of our gas tanks. This is torqued down here first at 15 foot-pounds, and then you hold this one with a wrench and torque the next one at 15 foot-pounds. Do not over-torque them. They don't need it. They seal way below 15 foot-pounds, but that's our safety. We have some really cool rubber sealing washers that are built into the copper washer system. We do have the ability to safety wire everything as well. The first thing you can do is install this fitting. You're going to tighten everything down, and then you're going to put, about 24-inch long line on here. This line will get cut later on, but it's important that everything is installed before you insert the tank, because you're no longer going to have access to these fittings. This goes for both tanks. So that's the first thing you're going to do. Let's hop inside the car and show you what they look like installed and move on forward. All right, guys, so the first thing we do when we get the tank dropped in here is we kind of just push the fuel lines out of the way, and we start with the bracketry. The brackets are all slotted. Every car is a little bit different, so you have some movement. I just like to just pull the tank back and tighten the brackets down from there, Loctiting all of the Allen head bolts, and then once everything is tight, we can kind of move on from there. We're going to start with this fitting. This is your 4 AM banjo. As you can see, it comes up and over the seat base. The banjo angles downward, and you Loctite the stainless part. You never Loctite any AN fittings. Moving on to the fill neck hose. Something I wanted to notice is that on the billet portion of it, there's this little dowel, locking dowel we call it, back here. And it really, it's like acts as an alignment pin, and it rides on the rail of the seat base. And essentially what it does, as you can see, is it sits, and then that allows you to pivot on there. Really what that is so that when you tighten the cap, this thing doesn't slide back and forth. But this little raised area sits on this. And what we've seen is a lot of guys will have their gas cap like way up here. It doesn't, it rotates until it stops. That's where it lands. So another thing is when you're installing this, you'll leave everything loose, because these 13 mils right here are really hard to get to. I like to leave this clamp loose, but in this orientation, this clamp loose, but in this orientation, so when you install it, all these are easy to get to. Everything's really tight here. This is, really high capacity gas tank, so we could do a lot less capacity and make it easy to work around, or maximum capacity 6 gallons. And it's also tight to get this seat bolt on here. But installing it, that's what you're up against. So, all right, guys, so back to the orientation of these clamps. They're all snug. We have to take this off. I just set it up here for now. We're gonna take this bolt, run it through the back here. This will make installation way easier. You have that. Come back up here. Silicone goes this direction. Doesn't have to be perfect yet. And get your clamp where you want it. Hold the bolt from the back side. Push that all on. This makes putting the nut on the bolt that much easier. It's already a tight fit, and before you tighten it, just remember you're going to take this fill neck and rotate it down. You'll feel it stop on that back piece that we talked about. And then from here, just make sure your clamps have enough clearance. They're not touching the seat or anything. I have a lot of guys that will leave this up, and as you can see, it'll hit the seat. You try to slide the seat forward, it hits the gas cap, can't get the gas cap off. This is built to be all the way forward. And at this point, the seat can go all the way forward, all the way back. It clears everything just fine. Everything's just a really tight fit. All right, guys, so now that you've got your fuel lines all roughly ran, you're just gonna come up here. You can see this fuel line coming up, this vent line coming up. You can route them wherever you want and kind of put your slack wherever you want. I still like to leave all the lines loose at this point, but you kind of have a rough idea of what everything's going to start to look like. So Let's hop to the other side of the car and I'll show you how we mount the fuel pumps, where the vent line goes, and when to cut your fuel lines. All right guys, on this side you can see the vent lines and fuel line running from the driver's side tank. It's coming up behind this panel and we're meeting all of the vent lines right here. And this is where you're going to be attaching this 4AN Y fitting. And this essentially brings both of your gas tank vents to one line, and then that will continue to the front. If you're just running one tank, you will use this fitting. It's going to attach your one vent line to the main vent line to the front. When I install it, I try to keep them in this general area. There's no right or wrong way to install it. The less the car has, the easier it is to plumb. That being said, this car is pretty prepped out and it's still easy to plumb. So this is the general idea of how your plumbing is going to start to look. For the fuel pumps, we take both of our hose fittings like this. We're going to attach them in the middle with a button head Allen and this locking nut. We mount it right in the middle of the center console with a nut. The trick to making this all slide together really easy is soap and water in here. Slide your fuel pumps through, and once you have them looking something like this, about in the middle, you go ahead and start tightening everything down. Once you have everything tightened down, then you're really able to start fitting up your fuel lines. So at this point, you know where this 6AN fitting ends, so you're able to bring your fuel line up, mark it, cut it. Don't pull the fuel line tight. Always allow some slack in there for everything to kind of move. Then you can cut the fuel line, push your push lock on there, and then you can tighten it down to the fuel pump. Do the same thing with the other side, and then we will come to the front of the fuel pumps and plumb forward. These blue fittings are included in your fuel pump box. Make sure you install the copper washer with them, tighten those down, Loctite on those, and then move forward. With that being said, Loctite only goes on national pipe thread fittings and bolts. So anything that's a 6AN or an AN style fitting, so like this side would be no Loctite, the other side would have Loctite. So if it's an AN fitting where it's two cones meeting each other, no Loctite. Once you have the fuel pumps mounted, then we can start coming to the front and start routing towards the gas tank. All right guys, once you have the fuel pumps on, I like to put these 6ANs on. From here, I just like to start running the fuel line and vent line forward, eventually getting on to this factory fuel tank supply line, and I'll just follow it up all the way to the factory fuel tank. Same thing with this passenger side line. I kind of like to stay in that same area, and then we're gonna come up here in the front and meet the lines together. Once you have it up front, you can see here that we have a Y splitter. This is the 6AN Y splitter. This is where you're gonna connect your two fuel pump lines into one feed line and take it all the way up to the factory fill neck. All right, you guys got your vent lines ran roughly up here, and it's time to put a 3/8 hole in the factory fill neck. And a lot of guys get confused on this because the 3/8 hole, once drilled, is smaller than the fitting itself. The reason is that we want to force the fitting through. This fitting is a proprietary fitting that we use. It is shaped for the factory fill neck. The curvature is the same. It puts a nice tight squeeze on it, and it seals really good to the rubber. Once you have that marked, installed, you will then start plumbing up the rest of it. These fittings are all in the instructions, but you're going to use your 6AN to 8th National Pipe Thread 90 fitting. The 90 fitting, that's going to connect the vent line. Then from there, you can measure and cut to length your 6AN feed line. And then essentially what this does is feed into the factory fill neck. As simple as that. This is probably the best place for just a picture. Once you see it, you understand it type deal. And then you got everything plumbed, and you can go back through, tighten everything up, make sure there's no kinks, bends, or twists in any of the fuel lines or vent lines. You can put your cotter key in your stainless fitting up here at the fill neck, start zip tying some stuff up nice and clean, make sure it's not touching any sharp edges, stuff like that. Then before you assemble the car, pump, test, make sure you don't have any leak, and then go from there. Let's move on to the wiring real quick because it's kind of a universal setup depending on where you want to put your switch, what bus bar you want to be onto, other accessories, so on and so forth. So let's jump into the other side of the car. We're going to talk about some wiring. All right guys, so as far as the wiring goes, so you can wire these to whichever bus bar you want. On the Maverick R platform, there's two bus bars. You've got your upper and then the one by your shifter. Where you want to put your switch is probably the best way to determine which bus bar you're going to use. There is no right or wrong way to wire them, to place your switch, to plumb them even. We keep these pretty universal. Everyone's got something else going on with their car. Maybe they're running just one tank, two tanks. You can even run 4 tanks off the system. With that being said, We have ours mounted up here. Our switches are a momentary switch. So the only way that you can fill the tank is if you're pushing and holding. They fill pretty fast, about 1.5 gallons per minute. Push, hold, it'll fill, you can let off. I don't like to fill the tank until it's about half empty, then I'll transfer fuel. But if you were to hold this button too long, it would simply fill the factory gas tank. It would overfill it, and then it would pump the fuel back through the vent line back to your factory tanks. There's really no way to possibly overfill our gas tanks. You can't cause any damage, you can't cause any fuel leaks with that. It's a momentary switch, push, hold. If you hold too long, don't worry about it. Wiring to the fuel pumps. You have a simple black and a red, hot, ground. You're gonna wire this to one fuel pump, assuming that you're just running one tank. If you're running 2 tanks, we have an extension harness. And essentially that allows you to, again, mount the fuel pumps wherever you want. On this car, they're pretty close to each other. So ignoring this whole section of the harness, you're gonna have this wiring. You're gonna go from one fuel pump to the other fuel pump and then take the factory harness and wire it to either fuel pump. And then when you push this button, at that time, since both fuel pumps are linked, they will both turn on at the same time. You can run the fuel pumps dry. There's nothing wrong with that. It takes about 5 constant hours of running before you could actually hurt one of the external fuel pumps. That's why we love external fuel pumps. You can run them, they run fast, there's no issues with them, they're pretty bulletproof, and they don't take up any tank capacity. That's one of the big things we like about external fuel pumps. That's why every race car runs an external fuel pump. That's the plumbing, the wiring. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. This is a pretty good guideline on how to get it done quickly, efficiently, in a pretty bulletproof way. If you guys got any questions, you can email us, customer support at rpmsidebyside.com, and we hope you enjoy this product.